The stars did not scream when it arrived, but space-time did. Across the Alpha Quadrant, subspace rippled like disturbed water, a distortion so brief and violent that most long-range sensors dismissed it as background noise. Only later would analysts realize the truth. Something had crossed not just distance, but realities. A tear opened beyond warp lanes and collapsed in less than a second, leaving behind a falling star wrapped in red and blue fire. It struck an uncharted M-class planet, orbiting a yellow sun near the Federation frontier during the late 24th century, an era of uneasy peace and hidden threats. Forests ignited, mountains fractured. When the light faded, a single figure lay in the crater, unburned, unmoving, alive. Kal-El of Krypton drew breath under a sky that was not his own. Above him, two moons drifted in silent balance. Beneath him, the planet trembled as if reacting to his presence. The sun overhead poured energy into his cells at a rate he had never felt before, stronger than Earth's yellow sun, cleaner, unfiltered by familiar cosmic radiation. His senses expanded instinctively, hearing oceans beyond the horizon, feeling tectonic plates settle, sensing something else. Not magic, not the Force, a structured hum threaded through reality itself. Subspace. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop a character name in comments. May the Force be with you. Kal-El rose slowly, careful not to crack the ground again. He wore the familiar symbol of hope on his chest, but the universe around him did not recognize it. The air tasted different. Physics felt disciplined. Where his home universe bent easily under will and speed, this one resisted, layered with invisible rules, warp fields, subspace strata, artificial gravity so precise it felt intentional, even when absent. He took to the sky, not at full speed, not yet. He tested the limits. The planet's gravity surrendered instantly. The atmosphere parted without resistance. Space greeted him cold and vast, stars arranged in unfamiliar constellations, no Earth, no soul, no known beacon of civilization. But he was not alone. Light flared nearby, blue-white and controlled. A starship dropped out of warp, its nacelles glowing, its hull marked with a symbol of unity rather than conquest. USS Tevora, a Federation science vessel, rerouted from a stellar survey after detecting anomalous energy readings that defied classification. On the bridge, alarms did not blare. Starfleet training kept voices calm, even as sensor officers stared at impossible data. No warp signature, no impulse trail, no known propulsion method. Sir, the object fell out of nothing. Captain Rahl, Andorian, antennae twitching, leaned forward. Life signs? A pause, then disbelief. Humanoid, human adjacent, cellular density off the charts, energy absorption readings exceeding any known biological organism. The view screen magnified the figure floating effortlessly in open space, cape shifting despite the vacuum, eye spanning the stars with quiet focus. A god? The ensign whispered before catching herself. No, the Vulcan science officer replied calmly. Gods do not require observation. This being does. Protocol demanded caution. The prime directive demanded distance. But curiosity, the driving engine of the Federation, demanded engagement. Hail him. Standard greeting, non-threatening posture. The communication beam reached Kal-El like a gentle tap against his awareness. He turned, eyes narrowing not in fear, but in analysis. The ship was elegant, efficient, bristling with technology, yet radiating no hostility. No weapons charging, no shields flaring. A voice emerged, calm and measured. Unidentified individual, this is the Federation starship Tivora. We mean you no harm. If you can hear us, please respond. Kal-El hovered in silence for a long moment. He had heard many first contacts in his life: panic, aggression, awe. This one carried restraint, ethical weight. He answered by moving closer, slowly, hands open, posture relaxed. "I hear you," his voice transmitted through the void by means he did not yet understand, but instinctively mirrored. "My name is Kal-El. I'm not from your universe, and I don't wish to cause harm." On the bridge, silence reigned. Not fear, not relief, calculation. A being claiming extra-dimensional origin without deception markers. No detectable psionic influence, no aggressive intent. Power readings that made starship-scale weapons look primitive. Starfleet faced a problem they had never truly solved: what to do when absolute power arrived without asking permission. Captain Rao chose the only option Starfleet had ever trusted. "Kal-El, we are explorers. If you are willing, we request peaceful dialogue. There are rules we follow." "I have rules too," Kal-El replied, glancing back at the planet below, the crater, the burning forests, the unintended damage of his arrival. As the Tivora adjusted position, far beyond Federation borders, other ears listened. A Romulan listening post flagged the same subspace distortion, categorizing it not as anomaly, but opportunity. A Klingon patrol rerouted, warriors sharpening their anticipation at the thought of a challenger who fell from the sky. In a Ferengi trade hub, algorithms recalculated the value of a single invulnerable being. And in the dark between trans-warp corridors, the Borg collective altered course by a fraction of a degree. Target identified, biological uniqueness confirmed, resistance potential extraordinary, adaptation required. Kal-El did not hear that yet, but the galaxy had begun to move around him. Kal-El stood within a room that defied instinct. The transporter chamber of the USS Tivora hummed softly, matter reassembling around him with surgical precision. He felt no threat in the process, only curiosity. The technology did not force him apart molecule by molecule the way crude weapons might have. It asked reality for permission, and reality complied. That alone intrigued him. The moment his boots touched the deck, gravity asserted itself perfectly, tuned to a standard he recognized instinctively as human normal. Artificial, but elegant. The air carried trace ions, recycled flawlessly. This was not a warship. It was a place built for minds, not conquest. Captain Rao entered with measured steps, flanked by security officers who carried phasers set deliberately to stun, symbolic more than practical. The Andorian's antennae angled forward, a sign of focused attention rather than aggression. "You're aboard a Federation vessel," Rao said. "You are our guest, not our prisoner." "I appreciate that," Kal-El replied. His eyes swept the corridor beyond, taking in Elkar's displays, the quiet efficiency of a crew that had already decided panic was unproductive. "Your technology is impressive, but your restraint is rarer." The Vulcan science officer, Commander T'Pel, studied him openly. "Your cellular structure absorbs stellar radiation with near-perfect efficiency. Under our local yellow stars, your power output increases exponentially, yet you demonstrate deliberate limitation. That suggests ethical conditioning rather than instinct." Kal-El met her gaze. "Power without control isn't strength. It's fear wearing confidence." That answer unsettled more than it reassured. In the briefing room, holographic projections lit the air, stellar charts of the Alpha Quadrant, political borders layered with cautionary markers. Federation space, Klingon Empire, Romulan Star Empire, neutral zones thick with history and mistrust. You arrived in a volatile region, Captain Rao said, and in a time when balance is fragile. Kal-El listened as they explained this galaxy's philosophy, the prime directive, non-interference, the belief that civilizations must rise or fall on their own terms. It was not unfamiliar to him. He had lived among humans long enough to understand the danger of becoming a crutch for progress. But this doctrine went further. It codified restraint. "And if restraint costs lives?" Kal-El asked quietly. T'Pel answered without hesitation. "Then we endure the moral burden, because the alternative is domination disguised as salvation." The words struck deeper than any weapon. Krypton had once believed itself advanced enough to guide the universe. It had died of that arrogance. Before Kal-El could respond, the ship shuddered, not from impact, but from proximity alarms. Klingon birds of prey decloaking off the port bow, weapons not yet armed. On the view screen, angular warships slid into view like predators circling unfamiliar prey. A hail came through immediately, voice rough, eager. "Federation vessel," the Klingon commander snarled. "We sensed the arrival of a warrior who fell from the sky without ship or blade. By right of strength, he must face us or be declared a myth." Kal-El felt it then, the pull of another culture's values pressing against his own. Honor through combat, worth proven by blood. Not evil, but dangerous when misunderstood. Captain Rao turned to him. "We will not hand you over, but Klingons respect choice. The decision must be yours." Outside the ship, Kal-El could hear Klingon heartbeats, feel the reactor heat of their vessels, sense the anticipation rolling off them like thunder. He could end this in seconds, disable every ship, humble every warrior, prove himself a god. Instead, he exhaled. "I won't fight to prove I deserve to exist, but I won't hide either." He stepped toward the transporter pad once more. "I'll speak to them, openly, as myself." As energy gathered around him, Commander T'Pel tilted her head slightly. "You are choosing uncertainty over dominance." Kal-El smiled faintly. "That's how hope survives." Moments later, he stood in open space again, facing Klingon warships with nothing but resolve and restraint, unaware that Romulan sensors were already recording every heartbeat, and that the Borg had begun the first simulations of his assimilation. The galaxy was no longer observing him, it was testing him. Space carried sound only through instruments. Yet the Klingons felt Kal-El's presence the moment he crossed the distance between ships. He did not rush, he did not posture. He simply hovered at equal distance from all three birds of prey, cape drifting as if the void itself acknowledged him. The Klingon commander, Kavarn, appeared on an open channel without ceremony. His armor was scarred, his eyes bright with expectation rather than hatred. "You stand unarmed before Klingon warships," Kavarn growled. "Either you are a fool or a challenge worthy of song." Kal-El inclined his head. "I'm neither your enemy nor your prize. I didn't come here to conquer. I came because I had no choice." Kavarn laughed, a harsh, approving sound. "All warriors arrive without choice. Only cowards pretend otherwise." The birds of prey shifted subtly, weapons still cold but ready. Klingon sensors struggled. No shield frequency, no power core, no measurable propulsion. Yet the being before them radiated more contained force than a battlecruiser at full burn. "Fight me," Kavarn said. "Not to the death, to truth. One strike. If you bleed, you are mortal. If you do not, you are legend."
On the bridge of the Tvora, Starfleet officers tensed. One blow from Kal-El could pulverize a ship. One blow from a Klingon disruptor would be meaningless, but symbolism mattered here more than outcome. Kal-El weighed the choice with care. Refusal might be seen as weakness. Violence would confirm their fears. He chose a third path. One strike, he agreed, but not with weapons. He moved before Kavarn could respond, closing the distance with controlled speed, stopping inches from the Klingon commander's vessel. Then he struck. Not the ship, he struck space itself. A focused shock wave rippled outward, a precise release of force calibrated to rattle hulls without breaching them. The birds of prey shook violently, inertial dampeners screaming as systems struggled to compensate. Consoles sparked, warriors were thrown to their knees, and then silence. Kal-El hovered exactly where he had been, untouched, unmoved. On Kavarn's bridge, the Klingon commander rose slowly, blood trickling from a split brow, not from the blow, but from being thrown against his own command chair. He laughed again, louder this time. "He could have destroyed us," Kavarn said, wiping the blood with his thumb and tasting it. "And he chose restraint. That is not weakness." The Klingon ships powered down weapons. "You are no god," Kavarn continued. "Gods demand worship. You demand nothing. That makes you dangerous in a different way." Without further ceremony, the birds of prey cloaked and vanished. Kal-El exhaled. A small thing, a necessary thing. But far away, in the artificial shadows of an Romulan listening array, intelligence officers replayed the encounter frame by frame. They noted the precision, the mercy, the refusal to dominate. "He will never rule through fear," a Romulan analyst said. "Then we must rule through him," a tall sheer handler replied. Even farther still, beyond Federation charts, a cube altered its course more sharply than before. Resistance observed, mercy pattern detected, ethical constraint confirmed. Conclusion: subject not governed by survival instinct. Adaptation complexity increased. Kal-El returned to the Tvora, unaware that by refusing to bleed, he had drawn lines across the Alpha Quadrant, lines others would now try to cross.
The USS Tvora moved at warp 6 along the Federation frontier, its course officially logged as a routine stellar cartography mission. Unofficially, it had become the most closely monitored ship in the quadrant. Kal-El stood alone in the observation lounge, hands clasped behind his back, gazing through the transparent aluminum viewport. Stars stretched into silver lines and snapped back into pinpoints as the ship adjusted speed. Warp travel felt structured. Unlike his own flight, pure will and momentum, this was cooperation with space-time itself, bending rather than breaking the rules. Behind him, the doors whispered open. Captain Rahl did not interrupt the silence immediately. He watched the man who could shatter planets with a careless motion, yet stood as still as a monk. "You handled the Klingons better than some of our admirals," Rahl said at last. "They'll be telling that story for decades." Kal-El didn't turn. "I didn't win anything." "You survived," Rahl replied. "In this region, that counts." The captain stepped closer, antennae angled neutrally. "Starfleet Command is divided. Some believe you're a once-in-a-millennium opportunity. Others believe you're an extinction-level variable." Kal-El finally faced him. "And you?" Rahl hesitated, a rare thing for a Starfleet captain. "I believe you're sincere, and sincerity at your scale is terrifying." Before Kal-El could respond, the ship slowed. The hum of warp faded into sublight quiet. "Captain," the helmsman called out, "we're being hailed. Ferengi vessel, Decorah-class Marauder." Kal-El frowned slightly. "They followed us?" "They always do," Rahl said dryly. On the view screen, the Ferengi ship loomed, bulbous, ostentatious, bristling with hidden weapons behind layers of gold-plated aesthetics. The face that appeared next was wide-grinned, lobes heavy with jewelry. "Greetings, valued potential partners. I am Diamond Bruntak, independent entrepreneur and visionary investor. I couldn't help but notice your guest." Kal-El could hear it, the spike in heart rate, the chemical rush of greed, the mental arithmetic happening faster than most computers. This was not a warrior culture, not a philosophical one either. This was profit distilled. "We're on a Starfleet mission," Captain Rao said evenly. "You're interfering." Bruntak waved a dismissive hand. "Please, interfering implies hostility. I prefer the term networking. Now, about the flying man." Kal-El stepped into frame voluntarily. "I'm not for sale," he said calmly. Bruntak's eyes widened, not in fear, but delight. "Ah, negotiation begins with confidence. Excellent sign." Rao stiffened. "Diamond, end transmission." But Bruntak leaned closer to his screen. "Think bigger, my invulnerable friend. Medical applications, disaster response, strategic deterrence leasing. Entire planets would pay fortunes just to borrow you." Kal-El felt a flicker of anger, not for himself, but for the casual reduction of lives into balance sheets. "You trade in suffering," he said. Bruntak chuckled. "Everyone does. We just admit it." Before the exchange could escalate, the Ferengi ship's sensors flared, then went dark. Bruntak's smile vanished. "What did you do?" he snapped. The Tavoris tactical officer looked up sharply. "Captain, another signal just cut through. Romulan encryption, high level." The view screen shifted. Green-lit shadows resolved into the stern face of a Romulan commander, expression composed, eyes calculating. "This conversation has gone long enough. Kal-El of Krypton. The Star Empire requests your attention." Bruntak sputtered protests as his channel was overridden. The Romulan inclined her head slightly, not in respect, but acknowledgement. "I am Commander Sela Thorian, Tal Shiar Liaison. We have studied your restraint." Kal-El met her gaze, senses brushing against layers of deception like cold knives. "You've been watching since I arrived." "Yes," Sela said smoothly, "and we believe you are wasted under Federation indecision." Captain Rahl bristled. "This is a violation of treaties that no longer reflect reality. The Borg advance. Klingon honor fractures into civil rivalries. The Federation debates philosophy while the Quadrant burns." Her eyes returned to Kal-El. "You could end wars before they begin and force peace, not as a tyrant, but as a stabilizing constant." Kal-El felt the weight of it, not temptation, responsibility. The idea that with a fraction more intervention, millions might be spared suffering. "And the cost?" he asked. Sela smiled faintly. "Trust, authority, and your willingness to accept that some freedoms must be managed." Behind her words lay visions, Romulan fleets acting with impunity under her shadow, dissent silenced in the name of order, peace purchased with quiet fear. Kal-El shook his head slowly. "I've seen that future. It ends the same way every time." Sela's expression hardened. "Then you will be an obstacle." The channel cut. Almost immediately, alarms sounded. "Multiple warp signatures," the tactical officer reported. "Romulan warbirds decloaking at extreme range, weapons charging but holding position." At the same time, subspace crackled with a different tone, cold, mechanical, relentless. The Borg signal reached the ship like a pressure behind the eyes. Kal-El felt it instantly. Not a voice, a pull. Data reached the bridge moments later. "Captain,
Long-range sensors confirm a Borg cube has altered course toward this sector. Estimated arrival 36 hours. Silence followed. Kal-El closed his eyes. For the first time since his arrival, he felt something close to uncertainty. Not fear of defeat, but fear of consequence. Every faction now knew what he was. Every choice forward would tilt the balance of the Alpha Quadrant. And somewhere in the dark, a collective mind was learning how to adapt to hope.
The USS Tavora shuddered lightly in the wake of warp field adjustments, but the tension on the bridge was heavy enough to feel like gravity. Kal-El stood near the viewport, cape brushing softly against the floor, eyes scanning the deep black of space for signs of the looming Borg threat. Every fiber of his being screamed for intervention, yet he restrained himself. He could annihilate a Borg cube in moments, disrupt its cohesion, overload its collective, but in this universe, every act had consequences, subtle and immediate, that even superhuman strength could not erase. Captain Rahl broke the silence. "Kal-El, you are aware the Borg do not negotiate. Once they assimilate, nothing is spared. Starfleet alone cannot hold them at bay." "I know," Kal-El replied, voice low but unwavering. "But destroying them outright risks destabilizing this quadrant. The collective adapts. If I destroy a cube, the next will be stronger, faster, smarter. And the people here, those who will survive, will suffer for it." A moment of uneasy silence followed as the bridge crew absorbed the weight of that reasoning. Commander T'Pel, Vulcan logic etched into her serene expression, finally spoke. "You are considering containment rather than eradication, a course of ethical restraint rarely possible for beings of your capacity. Yet it is the only strategy that preserves both life and moral agency. Remarkable." Kal-El nodded slightly. "I'm not here to conquer or rule. I am here to ensure they have a chance to govern themselves, even if that chance is imperfect." Outside, sensors flared. The Romulan warbirds had taken positions along key transwarp corridors, scanning for weakness, reading Kal-El's movements like an invasive hand across the quadrant. The Klingons, meanwhile, were regrouping near the neutral zone, eager to test their warrior codes against a being whose restraint had already humiliated them. And the Ferengi, predictably, were plotting how to monetize the coming conflict, oblivious to the lives their calculations might destroy. Kal-El focused. He could feel the subtle threads of subspace rippling with tension. Every vessel, every faction, every mind he had yet to meet was now aware of his presence and capabilities. The Alpha Quadrant had entered a new epoch, one defined not by politics or technology alone, but by the existence of a being whose decisions could outweigh starship fleets. The Borg cube emerged from transwarp space like a black monolith, engines silent but presence undeniable. It was massive, an endless lattice of machinery and biological tissue intertwined, a hive mind's physical manifestation. Kal-El sensed it, felt the pulse of the collective probing him, measuring his genetic and cellular signature. They had identified his anomaly and were adjusting, learning. "Captain, their sensors are locking on. They're analyzing life signs. I don't think they realize what they're up against." Kal-El moved to the center of the bridge, letting his aura of calm authority radiate subtly, not domination, but reassurance. "They are aware of me," he said quietly, "but awareness is not understanding. They will adapt, yes, but I can guide them, indirectly." "Indirectly?" Rao asked. "I can show restraint. I can demonstrate limits. I can let them experience choice before they are forced to assimilate it." T'Pel tilted her head slightly. a calculated risk requiring absolute control. Any misstep and the Borg will perceive exploitation or weakness and strike indiscriminately. Kal-El nodded slightly. Then the next step is diplomacy. I will confront the Romulans first. They are predictable in their ambition. If I can shape their expectations, I can create leverage before the cube arrives. Outside the Tevora, Kal-El leapt from the hull, moving at supersonic speeds across space toward the Romulan warbirds. Their sensors immediately detected him, and the systems activated defensive maneuvers, energy weapons charging preemptively. But Kal-El's presence was not a threat in intention, it was a demonstration of potential. He hovered between the ships, absorbing radiation from the nearest star to increase his sensory perception and reaction times. Every Romulan sensor ping, every data point, every internal speculation was catalogued in his mind. They expected intimidation. He offered clarity instead. "You do not understand me," he said, voice amplified and steady, resonating through subspace to every channel they could receive. "I am not here to conquer, nor to govern. I am here to prevent unnecessary suffering." A pause. Static on their channels, then the Romulan commander's voice returned, tinged with both caution and curiosity. "Your words suggest a strength we cannot measure. Why show restraint?" Kal-El tilted his head slightly. "Because restraint is the measure of true power. Because unchecked strength can destroy even those it seeks to protect. And because you, like all of us, must choose your own path." Back on the Tevora, the bridge crew observed the unfolding encounter with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "He's reasoning with them?" Raoul muttered. "That's unprecedented." "Yes," T'Pel said. "He demonstrates moral authority without coercion, a phenomenon not recorded in Starfleet archives. This is not diplomacy by protocol or by fear. This is diplomacy by presence and ethical gravity." Meanwhile, the Borg cube adjusted course slightly, as though sensing the dynamics between Kal-El and the Romulans. The collective began running simulations, resistance strategies, optimal engagement tactics, cellular analysis of the anomaly, adaptation potential. Each scenario indicated one overwhelming variable: Kal-El's restraint. Hours passed. Kal-El returned to the Tevora, leaving the Romulans contemplative and unsettled. The ship's crew debriefed him, trying to quantify choices that defied any metric they had learned. "By engaging them this way," Raoul said carefully, "you've delayed potential conflict with both the Romulans and the Borg. But what comes next? The Klingons? The Ferengi? The other factions that now know of you?" Kal-El considered this. "They will act according to their natures. I cannot force decisions. I can only influence outcomes, and only through example, not imposition. Every action from here must weigh consequences as heavily as outcomes." Outside, distant stars burned indifferently, and in the void between them, the Borg cube inched closer, an ill-inektable tide. Yet in its approach, it had begun to consider, not conquest, not domination, but possibility. Kal-El exhaled, feeling the burden of omnipotence weighed against the fragile lattice of morality and ethics. He was more powerful than anything this universe had seen, yet he was not a god here, not yet, not without choice, and choice was a force even stronger than raw strength. He looked to the stars. In hours or days, the cube would arrive. Every faction now knew his name, his intentions, and his capacity. Every choice he made would ripple outward, unseen but potent. And he understood, finally, that being a symbol of restraint in a galaxy defined by ambition was perhaps the most difficult challenge of all.
The USS Tevora remained at sublight, hovering on the fringe of Federation space, a solitary point of stability amid swirling chaos.
Kal-El had returned from his encounter with the Romulans, but the repercussions of that engagement were already unfolding in ways no one aboard the ship could fully predict. Sensors blinked and hummed, plotting the movements of Klingon patrols, Romulan warbirds, and even Ferengi scout ships. Each faction recalculated, not based on threat alone, but on the unexpected variable, a single being whose actions did not follow conventional logic, one who refused domination yet radiated unstoppable potential. Kal-El walked the observation deck, cape brushing lightly over the floor, thoughts bridging strategy and morality. The Borg cube loomed in the quadrant like a shadow stretching across the galaxy. Unlike anything he had faced on Earth, this was not a mind susceptible to negotiation or appeal. The collective would adapt. It would learn from every encounter, every hesitation, every demonstration of restraint. And yet, to strike preemptively would guarantee massive collateral damage, something he could not allow. Captain Rahl approached, antenna stiff. Kal-El, we've received intelligence from Federation outposts. The Klingons are organizing a coalition to engage you directly. They claim it is to honor warrior tradition, but there is no disguising the underlying tension. They fear what you represent. Not defeat, not conquest, influence. Kal-El's eyes narrowed. Influence without coercion is always threatening to those who rely on force, but I cannot ignore their approach. I will not be baited into unnecessary conflict. From across the room, Commander T'Pel's fingers danced across her console, projecting holographic schematics of Klingon ships and orbital trajectories. The coalition consists of 3 birds of prey and 1 battlecruiser, each equipped with disruptors calibrated for engagement against high-energy targets. They will attempt intimidation first, followed by ritualized combat if provoked. Kal-El closed his eyes, sensing the energy waves streaming from each vessel. In his universe, he could move planets if needed. Here, he restrained himself, not because of weakness, but because the quadrant's politics demanded it. Even a single act of overwhelming force could cascade into catastrophic consequences, entangling alliances and prompting preemptive strikes from factions he had yet to encounter. The T'Vora's communications officer, an eager young human ensign, hesitated before speaking. "Captain, Starfleet Command has sent a contingency directive. They advise caution. Engage only if directly threatened. Do not attempt to negotiate with Klingons yourself. They have unique customs." Kal-El's gaze drifted to the view screen, where faint outlines of Klingon vessels shimmered in subspace. "Caution," he murmured, "a compromise between inaction and aggression. I understand their code better than they believe. Their challenge is ritual, not annihilation. I will meet them halfway." Hours later, Kal-El emerged from the transporter, floating in space several kilometers from the Klingon formation. He allowed himself to be fully visible, a solitary figure in blue and red, the symbol of hope on his chest, blazing with an intensity fueled by the yellow sun. His eyes met the sensors of each ship, and he projected a presence that communicated calm, purpose, and inevitability. The Klingon commanders hesitated, sensing the moral authority and restraint radiating from this single being. Kvarn spoke first, his voice booming through subspace channels. "You dare appear without weapon or shield? You dishonor yourself by offering your life so freely." Kal-El's response was measured. "I honor life by not taking it unnecessarily. If you wish to test strength, we can find a way that does not destroy your ships, your crews, or your honor. There is a difference between proving oneself and killing to prove it." Kvarn growled, but something in the collective pause of Klingon sensors, shields, and hearts told him this being was unlike any other.
Their traditional display of strength required a tangible opponent, someone who could be overcome or defeated. Kal-El's refusal to conform disrupted the ritual entirely, forcing the Klingons to reckon with a paradox: absolute power exercised with restraint. Meanwhile, the Romulan warbirds continued shadowing from a distance, analyzing every microsecond of interaction. Commander Sela Thray Rian noted the subtle recalibration of Klingon tactics. He does not fight as we expect, yet he compels choice through choice. That is troubling, extremely troubling. Back aboard the Tavora, tension rippled through the crew. Even the most seasoned Starfleet officers, accustomed to calculated encounters with hostile civilizations, watched in awe as Kal-El navigated the cultural minefield without firing a single shot. Every decision he made carried the weight of potential catastrophe, yet his restraint created its own form of authority. The Borg cube inched closer, sensors probing deeper into subspace, absorbing data from each faction's interactions with Kal-El. Each tactical simulation predicted adaptation curves, resistance thresholds, and anomaly resilience, feeding them into a network of collective strategy. The cube analyzed, learned, and adjusted, but it did not yet strike, uncertain whether the anomaly was a weapon, a guardian, or something beyond comprehension. Kal-El sensed the shift in the quadrant. Factions that had once acted in isolation now calculated in relation to him. Klingons moderated aggression. Romulans considered indirect influence rather than immediate action. Ferengi adjusted trade negotiations to account for his potential presence in disputes. Even the Borg hesitated, the collective mind recalculating the cost-benefit of assimilation against the unpredictable variable of ethical choice. Captain Rahl finally broke the silence aboard the Tavora. "Kal-El, you've altered the entire quadrant's strategic balance without firing a single shot. That is impressive." Kal-El's voice was calm, yet carried the weight of responsibility. Power without consideration is meaningless. Strength must serve purpose, not ego. Every life preserved is more valuable than any victory gained through force. T'Pel observed him thoughtfully. "Your actions demonstrate a principle Starfleet has long theorized, but rarely observed at this scale. Restraint itself is a form of deterrence, a subtle equilibrium maintained through morality rather than weaponry." Kal-El nodded. "I cannot dictate the choices of others. I can only show what is possible when power is tempered by ethics. That may be all this quadrant is capable of, for now." As night fell across the Tavora's bridge, sensors detected the distant pulse of the Borg cube, now only a day's travel away. It was inevitable. The collision of worlds, factions, and ideals was approaching. Yet Kal-El did not flinch. He had seen worse in his universe: tyrants who demanded obedience, civilizations that fell to arrogance, innocence caught in the gears of destiny. Here, he would act differently. He would not dominate. He would not conquer. He would challenge the universe to rise to its own potential. And in doing so, he would teach even the most ruthless adversaries that power tempered with restraint could inspire as much fear as it could hope. Kal-El turned back to the view screen, watching the faint glimmer of distant ships aligning across the quadrant. He felt the pulse of countless lives, the fragile tension of politics, and the inexorable approach of the Borg. And he understood more than ever that influence without coercion was the ultimate test of strength.
The calm on the USS Tavora was fragile, a veneer stretched across a tension-laden quadrant. Kal-El floated near the observation window, absorbing the starlight of the system beyond, letting its warmth recharge him.
He could feel every ripple in subspace, every distant pulse of energy from nearby warp signatures, and the faint, persistent echo of the Borg cube slowly approaching. Each wave of energy that reached him carried information, ships maneuvering, engines powering up, life signs of countless beings unaware of the storm gathering around them. Captain Rahl approached, his antennae angled sharply in thought. Kal-El, the Klingon coalition has finalized their formation. 3 birds of prey and a battlecruiser will converge near the neutral zone in less than 6 hours. Their intent? Ritual combat. They seek a challenge. Honor will demand engagement. They do not understand restraint the way you do. Kal-El nodded slowly. I understand, but I cannot allow senseless loss. There must be another way. T'Pel, standing at a tactical console, projected a 3-dimensional model of the Klingon vessels. You have the power to neutralize them entirely, she said, her tone measured. Yet you have chosen to restrain your actions. You're ethical but risky. Any misstep could escalate the ritual into lethal engagement. I know, Kal-El replied. I will meet them on their terms, but not by destroying them. I will teach them a new understanding of strength. Honor is not measured solely by force. The T'Vora sensors flickered as a Romulan warbird decloaked at long range. Commander Sela Thurian appeared on the view screen, her expression cold and calculating. Kal-El, she said, your interactions with the Klingons are observed. You are testing their limits of restraint and honor. That is unwise. You underestimate the value of manipulation. Kal-El's eyes narrowed. Manipulation breeds dependence. I will not create pawns. I will create choice. Sela's expression darkened. Choice without power is meaningless. The quadrant respects only what can be enforced or feared. You may find that your morality is incompatible with survival here. Kal-El did not respond immediately. Instead, he projected himself into space, moving swiftly toward the Klingon formation. His velocity was calculated, deliberate, yet his presence alone radiated authority. The Klingons detected him instantly, the anomaly, the being whose power exceeded the combined firepower of their fleet, yet moved with restraint. Kavarn's voice boomed across subspace channels. You dare approach without weapon or shield? You dishonor the tradition of combat. I do not dishonor it. I honor it differently. I do not seek to kill to prove strength. I seek to show that strength can exist without needless violence. The Klingon ships paused, uncertain. Their ritual required combat, but what kind of combat could test honor without blood? The presence of Kal-El, unyielding yet unaggressive, introduced a paradox they could not reconcile. Their cultural instinct demanded challenge, yet to attack would contradict the honor they sought to uphold. On the T'Vora, the crew observed in awe. Captain Rahl whispered, "He's turning their code of honor against them without striking a blow." T'Pel nodded. He is demonstrating moral dominance, a concept that operates on a level Starfleet has theorized but never witnessed. It is deterrence through principle rather than force. The Romulan warbirds adjusted their position, recording every microsecond. Sela's calculated mind struggled with the anomaly before her. He defies prediction. He cannot be controlled, yet he influences behavior, subtly, ethically. This is unacceptable. He must either be allied or neutralized. Kal-El hovered between the Klingon ships, radiating calm energy. The Klingons read it subconsciously, sensing restraint as a form of power. Their disruptor banks wavered. The battlecruiser's shields fluctuated, as if unsure of purpose. I will not fight you, but I will not allow harm to those who cannot defend themselves. Honor can exist without destruction. For a long moment, silence dominated the void. The Klingons adjusted course slightly, an implicit acknowledgement of Kal-El's terms. They were learning, adapting, not from fear, but from choice. Meanwhile, the Borg cube advanced, sensors detecting all interactions. The collective registered the anomaly's unique pattern, extreme power coupled with ethical restraint. This deviation was unprecedented. The cube paused subspace drives, recalculating adaptation sequences. Assimilation was no longer a certainty. Uncertainty had entered the equation. Back on the Tavora, Captain Rahl addressed the bridge crew. Kal-El's presence has altered the quadrant's power dynamics. Klingons moderate aggression. Romulans hesitate. Even the Borg must reconsider. His restraint is shaping strategy in ways conventional diplomacy cannot. Kal-El returned to the ship, standing in the observation lounge. The tension of the quadrant pressed against him, yet he remained calm. Every decision, every movement carried consequences, but he had proven a fundamental truth: influence without force could command respect as effectively as power itself. T'Pel studied him, fingers tracing star charts. Your actions demonstrate that ethical integrity can function as a deterrent. You have rewritten the rules of engagement across 3 major factions without firing a weapon. Kal-El's gaze swept the stars. Strength is not only measured by power, it is measured by the restraint one exercises in the face of temptation. Outside the quadrant, the Borg cube continued its slow, relentless approach, yet even it hesitated, confronted by an anomaly that defied assimilation. Kal-El's choice to temper his power had created a ripple effect, challenging not only morality, but strategy, ethics, and survival itself. He turned back to the stars, sensing the countless lives whose fate now intertwined with his decisions. The Klingons, the Romulans, the Federation, the Ferengi, and even the Borg were all watching, calculating, reacting. The quadrant had entered a new equilibrium, one defined not by domination, but by the presence of a being who could command through choice. And Kal-El understood, more deeply than ever, that influence without coercion and power exercised with ethics could shape the future of entire civilizations, sometimes more effectively than force ever could.
The first scream came through subspace, not as sound, but as distortion. On the USS Tavora, consoles flared crimson as long-range sensors spiked violently. Subspace folded in on itself, collapsing into jagged geometries that no Federation model could fully interpret. It wasn't an attack, it was an announcement. "The Borg cube has exited transwarp," the tactical officer said, voice tight. "Distance, 3 light minutes, heading directly toward us." Kal-El felt it before the words finished leaving the officer's mouth. The collective's presence was not fear, not rage, it was pressure, like a vast intellect pressing its palm against the reality, testing for weakness. Subspace vibrated unnaturally, its layered structure resonating against the cube's adaptive field harmonics. Even Kal-El, whose senses stretched across spectrums most beings could not name, felt resistance for the first time since his arrival. Not pain, opposition. Captain Rao rose slowly from his chair. Red alert, all hands to stations. The bridge shifted as shields powered up, the hum of defensive systems filling the air. Outside the viewport, distant stars dimmed as if swallowed by a growing shadow. The cube emerged. It was immense, an impossible geometry of machinery and organic integration, surfaces crawling with energy conduits and modular weapon arrays. Its scale dwarfed every ship in the sector, its presence rewriting tactical logic before a single weapon fired. Kal-El stared at it, jaw set. It was not evil in the way tyrants were evil. It was inevitability given form. "Kal-El," Raoul said carefully, "Starfleet protocol dictates evacuation or delay tactics. We cannot engage directly." "I know,"
Kal-El replied, "and you won't." He stepped forward toward the transporter pad. T'Pel turned sharply. "You intend to confront the Borg alone?" "Yes." "That action carries unacceptable risk. The collective adapts. Your biological uniqueness will be analyzed, weaponized." Kal-El met her gaze. "Which is why I won't fight them the way they expect." He vanished in a column of light. Space warped as Kal-El appeared between the T'Vora and the cube, hovering motionless, cape drifting slowly as if caught in a tide only he could feel. The cube's surface shifted almost immediately, weapon ports reoriented, tractor beams locked, testing. Kal-El did not resist. The beams washed over him, graviton shear, magnetic confinement, energy fields designed to immobilize starships. They bent around him, distorted by his mass and molecular cohesion, unable to grip fully. The cube paused. A voice did not speak, but a presence pressed into his mind, cold, analytical, vast. "You are unique. You will be assimilated. Your biological distinctiveness will serve the collective." Kal-El closed his eyes briefly. "No," he said aloud, voice carrying through vacuum by force of will and controlled subspace vibration. Weapons fired. Green energy lanced out, striking Kal-El squarely in the chest. The blast would have obliterated a starship hull. Kal-El didn't move. He absorbed the energy, solar cells flaring as excess power bled harmlessly into space. His boots didn't even shift. On the cube, weapon frequencies adjusted instantly. A second volley struck, then a third, each recalibrated to bypass previous resistance. Kal-El grimaced. Not pain, effort. He could feel it now. The Borg were learning faster than most enemies he had faced. They weren't trying to overpower him. They were trying to understand him. On the T'Vora, stunned silence gripped the bridge. "They're adapting," the tactical officer whispered. "But he's letting them." Captain Raoul's hands tightened on the armrest. "What is he doing?" T'Pel answered softly, "Teaching them something they cannot assimilate." Kal-El moved, not at full speed, never that, but fast enough to cross kilometers in an instant. He struck the cube's surface with controlled force, not to destroy, but to disrupt. Hull plates buckled, entire sections went dark as he vibrated matter at a frequency that scrambled Borg internal coordination without killing drones. He phased through the cube. Inside, the collective was louder, millions of voices layered into one relentless chorus. Drones turned as he passed, weapons firing uselessly as he moved faster than their targeting algorithms could predict. He didn't strike them. He didn't tear them apart. He spoke. "This is what you don't understand," Kal-El said, voice echoing through the hive. "You believe perfection is uniformity, that survival requires surrender." He reached out, not physically, but conceptually, projecting memories, values, choice itself. He allowed fragments of his past to bleed into the cube. Krypton's arrogance, its refusal to change, the cost of believing one path was absolute. For the first time in Borg history, the collective hesitated. Assimilation routines slowed, drone synchronization stuttered. Error, contradiction detected, individual agency increases survival variance. Kal-El felt resistance surge as countermeasures deployed. Neuroelectric feedback lashed against his mind, an attempt to overwrite, to dominate. He staggered. Outside, the cube's shields flared erratically. "Captain, the cube is destabilizing, but Kal-El's energy readings are fluctuating." Kal-El clenched his fists. This was the cost. Not physical harm, but exertion, sustained projection of moral and cognitive resistance, strained even his near-limitless reserves. The Borg weren't draining his power. They were forcing him to maintain constant restraint under adaptive pressure. He could end it. One blow, full strength, through the cube's core, total annihilation. Billions of drones, once individuals, would die instantly. The galaxy would be safer. Kal-El hesitated, and in that hesitation, the Borg learned something new. He chooses limitation. This is exploitable. The cube fired again, this time not at him, but past him. A transwarp aperture opened. Destination, a densely populated Federation colony world. No, Kal-El said sharply. He moved faster than thought, crossing the distance in a blur of blue and red. He slammed into the transwarp aperture, forcing it shut through brute spatial stabilization, energy flaring as subspace screamed in protest. He emerged smoking, not wounded, but taxed. On the cube, systems recalibrated. Conclusion: subject will prioritize protection of others over self-preservation or victory. Tactical leverage identified. Kal-El hovered, breathing steadily. "So be it," he murmured. "Then I'll show you the cost of that choice." He turned back toward the cube, eyes blazing, not with rage, but resolve. Around them, the quadrant held its breath. Romulan warbirds lingered at extreme range, recording everything. Klingon ships watched in stunned silence, warriors unsure whether they were witnessing the birth of a legend or the challenge of a lifetime. Ferengi traders quietly recalculated markets based on survival probabilities, and the Federation, caught between doctrine and reality, realized something terrifying. For the first time, the Borg weren't just fighting, they were thinking differently, and Kal-El had forced that change by refusing to become a god.
The Borg cube did not retreat. That alone unsettled every observer in the sector. Its weapons went silent, its adaptive field stabilized. Massive surfaces that had moments ago crawled with tactical recalibration now settled into eerie stillness, like a predator that had stopped charging, not because it was defeated, but because it had learned. Kal-El hovered in the void, cape scorched at the edges from transwarp backlash, chest rising in a slow, controlled rhythm. The yellow star behind him poured energy into his cells, but the strain lingered. Not exhaustion, something subtler, the weight of sustained restraint against a foe that had just discovered how to weaponize morality. On the USS Tivora, the bridge crew waited in breathless silence. "They're not firing," the tactical officer whispered. "No weapons charging, no transwarp signatures." Captain Rahl's antennae twitched uneasily. "That's worse." Commander T'Pel's eyes narrowed. The collective has entered a strategic recalculation state. They are no longer attempting immediate assimilation. They are observing. The cube shifted orientation, not toward Kal-El, but toward the surrounding star field. Subspace rippled again, but this time with precision rather than violence. A signal spread outward, layered, complex, unmistakably Borg. A broadcast. Kal-El felt it like cold fingers brushing his mind. "We have analyzed you." The words were not spoken, they asserted themselves. "You will not allow extinction through inaction. You will not allow domination through action. Your constraints are consistent, predictable." Kal-El clenched his jaw. "You think understanding me gives you leverage. Understanding gives us optimization." Around the cube, smaller apertures opened, docking alcoves unfolding like mechanical pedals. Within them, drones activated, not armed for combat, but configured for demonstration. The first drone stepped forward. Its designation was irrelevant. What mattered was its face. Human, young, scarred by implants, eyes dull with enforced unity, but alive. Kal-El's breath caught. The drone spoke, not with the collective's voice, but with its own. "Help us." Across the quadrant, shock waves rippled, not through subspace, but through conscience. On the Tivora, a gasp escaped the bridge. "They're speaking as individuals," the tactical officer said, horrified. "They've never done this."
T'Pel's fingers trembled for the first time since Kal-El had met her. They are testing ethical response vectors, presenting a moral dilemma to force behavioral deviation. The drone took another step forward, movements jerky but deliberate. We were not consulted. We were taken. You value choice. Kal-El stared at the drone, X-ray vision cutting through metal and circuitry, seeing the person trapped beneath layers of control, neural inhibitors, assimilation nodes embedded deep, interlinked with millions of others. He could rip them free, but not without killing the drone. The Borg presence pressed closer. If you destroy the cube, they die. If you withdraw, they remain. If you attempt surgical liberation, adaptation probability exceeds 78%. Outcome, mass casualties. The collective had done the unthinkable. It had turned mercy into a battlefield. Kal-El lowered himself slowly until he hovered level with the drone. "You don't deserve this," he said quietly. The drone's eyes flickered. "We know." Behind them, the cube pulsed once, an unmistakable signal. "Decide." Far from the confrontation, Romulan command vessels buzzed with restrained urgency. Commander Sela Thrion watched the feed in silence, hands clasped behind her back. "He's cornered," an aide said. "No tactical solution without loss." Sela nodded slowly. "That's the point. The Borg have identified his constraint. He will break or redefine the rules of engagement entirely." Nearby, Klingon warriors crowded around their view screens. No songs were sung, no challenges shouted. What they witnessed was not combat, it was trial. "A true warrior," Kavarn murmured, "is measured not by who he kills, but by what he refuses to sacrifice." Ferengi traders, sensing no immediate profit, watched anyway. Some investments could not be priced yet. Kal-El closed his eyes. He thought of Krypton, its refusal to change, its certainty that perfection justified control. He thought of Earth, fragile, chaotic, endlessly flawed, yet alive because of choice. Then he opened his eyes. "You're wrong," he said to the collective. "There is another option." He moved, not toward the cube's core, toward its mind. Kal-El accelerated, slipping through adaptive fields before they could recalibrate, phasing through layers of alloy and circuitry until he reached the nexus, where data streams converged, where individuality was stripped and redistributed. The collective reacted instantly. Neuroelectric storms surged, countermeasures deployed, billions of processes focused on one anomaly. Kal-El screamed, not in pain, but in effort, as he reached out with everything he had. He didn't attack. He anchored. He stabilized subspace locally, using his own molecular coherence as a fixed point, an impossible act that forced the Borg's distributed consciousness into momentary alignment. For a fraction of a second, the collective was forced to experience itself without noise. In that silence, Kal-El projected choice, not as command, as option, a single concept repeated across trillions of connections. You can let go. The cube convulsed. Drones froze mid-motion, weapon arrays powered down abruptly, assimilation nodes flickered between directives. On the Tivora, alarms spiked and then flatlined. "Captain, the cube's internal synchronization just dropped by 40%. T'Pel stared at the data, disbelief cracking her composure. "He's forcing decentralization, temporarily. He's introducing voluntary divergence." Inside the cube, the collective fractured, not shattered, but questioned. Drones experienced individuality in flashes, fear, memory, regret. The drone Kal-El had spoken to collapsed to his knees, screaming, not from pain, but from sudden awareness. The Borg reacted violently. Counter-adaptation surged. Feedback slammed into Kal-El's mind like a collapsing star. His vision blurred. His muscles trembled. This was it. The cost. He could hold it, briefly, long enough. Kal-El roared, releasing a controlled burst of energy, not destructive, but stabilizing, forcing the cube into emergency stasis mode. Systems locked down, transwarp drives disengaged, weapons offline. Then he let go. He was flung clear of the cube, tumbling through space before arresting his momentum. He hovered there, chest heaving, eyes dimmer now, solar reserves temporarily taxed by sustained multidimensional exertion. The cube drifted, silent, not destroyed, not victorious, paused. Minutes passed. No one spoke. Finally, the Borg signal returned, changed. Outcome recorded. Assimilation attempt postponed. Subject classification updated. Existential variable. Future interaction probability uncertain. The cube powered a single transwarp aperture, not toward a populated system, but away. It vanished. Across the Alpha Quadrant, ships unclenched weapons they hadn't realized were fully charged. On the Tivora, Captain Rao sank back into his chair. He didn't defeat them, he said quietly. T'Pel nodded. He altered them, marginally, but meaningfully. Kal-El drifted back toward the ship, slower now, every movement deliberate. The transporter took him aboard gently, as if the ship itself sensed his strain. As he stepped onto the deck, crew members stared, not in fear, not in awe, but something closer to reverence. He shook his head faintly. "Don't," he said. "I'm not a solution. I'm a reminder." "A reminder of what?" Ral asked. Kal-El looked out at the stars. That even inevitability can hesitate when confronted with choice. But deep down, he knew the truth. The Borg had not been defeated. They had learned. And the next time they returned, they would not test his strength. They would test his resolve.
The Alpha Quadrant did not celebrate. There were no victory broadcasts, no declarations of triumph, no parades of starships tracing hopeful arcs across the stars. Instead, there was something far more unsettling, quiet, the kind that followed realization rather than relief. The USS Tivora remained stationary, its hull scarred only by proximity to events that would rewrite centuries of strategic doctrine. Kal-El stood once more in the observation lounge, shoulders squared, but posture subtly heavier than before. The yellow star beyond the viewport still fed him energy, but recovery was slow. What he had done inside the Borg cube had not damaged him, it had cost him. Sustained subspace anchoring, cognitive projection across a distributed hive mind, voluntary decentralization of an adaptive intelligence, none of it was meant to be possible. Yet it had been done. Captain Rahl joined him quietly, antennae lowered in a rare gesture of humility. "Starfleet Command is requesting a full debrief. So are the Klingon High Council. The Romulan Senate hasn't asked, but they're listening." Kal-El nodded faintly. "They should listen. The galaxy just learned something dangerous." "Dangerous?" asked Brawl. "That the Borg can hesitate, and that hesitation can be exploited by better minds than mine." Rahl absorbed that. "You changed the balance." "I destabilized it," Kal-El corrected. "There's a difference." Across the quadrant, reactions rippled outward. On Konos, Klingon warlords argued late into the cycle. Some called Kal-El a coward who refused glorious combat. Others named him Kalish-born, a warrior who proved strength by restraint rather than blood. The debate itself was unprecedented. Klingon honor had encountered something it could not neatly categorize, and survived.
Within the Romulan Star Empire, Tal Shiar analysts replayed every millisecond of the Borg encounter. Commander Sela Thurion stood before a projection of Kal-El, frozen mid-flight, energy flaring around him. "He cannot be controlled," one advisor said, "nor predicted." Sela's jaw tightened. "Then he must be respected and avoided." A pause. "For now." In Ferengi space, profit forecasts spiked and collapsed in equal measure. Markets hated uncertainty, but they thrived on new variables. A being who disrupted empires without demanding tribute? Incalculable, dangerous, fascinating. And in Federation space, philosophers argued. Starfleet Academy emergency symposia debated whether the Prime Directive had just been upheld or fundamentally challenged. Kal-El had not interfered in cultural development directly, yet his presence alone had altered outcomes. Was that violation or evolution? Commander T. Pell stood alone in the science lab, reviewing impossible data. She recorded, "He did not impose Federation values. He embodied a universal constant that power need not erase agency. Logic must account for this anomaly." Kal-El felt all of it, not as noise, but as weight. He turned from the viewport. "I won't stay here," he said. Captain Rao blinked. "You're leaving?" "Yes. Permanently? No. But I can't orbit your politics like a silent moon. Every day I remain visible, someone will try to turn me into leverage." "And where will you go?" Raul asked. Kal-El smiled faintly. "Where I'm needed least." He departed the Tavora without ceremony, slipping into the dark between stars, not at full speed, not fleeing, simply moving. He positioned himself far from borders, far from colonies, far from centers of power, a constant presence, but a distant one, a watcher, not a ruler. Weeks passed. The Borg did not return, but they changed. Scattered reports filtered in, cubes delaying assimilation, drones hesitating longer than models predicted, minor inefficiencies creeping into what was once perfect execution. Not mercy, not rebellion, variance. The collective had not adopted morality, but it had been exposed to choice, and choice, once introduced, could never be fully removed. Kal-El sensed it across subspace like a faint echo, his influence diminishing, as it should. He was not meant to be a permanent solution. He had never wanted to be. He floated near a quiet system, watching a pre-warp civilization's star flicker gently. He did nothing, said nothing, interfered not at all. And that restraint, that was his final lesson to the quadrant. Power does not need dominion. Strength does not need obedience. Hope does not need permission.
Superman did not conquer the Star Trek galaxy. He did something far more unsettling. He refused to. By landing in a universe governed by law, logic, and restraint, Kal-El became a mirror rather than a master. To the Federation, he revealed that principles can scale beyond doctrine. To the Klingons, that honor does not always demand blood. To the Romulans, that control without trust is brittle. And to the Borg, the most terrifying force of inevitability, the concept of choice became a flaw they could never fully eliminate. The Alpha Quadrant did not become safer overnight. Empires still schemed, wars still loomed. The Borg would return. But they would return changed. And so would the galaxy. Kal-El became a constant without command, a guardian without jurisdiction, a symbol without a flag. Not a god, not a weapon, not a solution. A reminder that even in a universe built on cold logic and infinite adaptation, there is one variable that cannot be perfectly optimized: the choice to be better. May the Force be with you. More stories await.